Hey guys, what's going on? Thanks for logging in to episode 2 of Fish East Live. I'm your host, Ben Wu, and together, as in you guys and myself, and of course all our great guests that we have on tonight, are going to delve into a super interesting topic that is relevant right now, and that is the fall transition. So just before we talk about this week, I want to thank all the viewers and everybody who supports Fish East for really taking the time to watch our podcast. We did launch a couple more interesting things during the week. We did a fish and chip episode with Donnie. It's going to be on in a second, and I hope you guys had a chance to take a look at that. If you didn't get the chance to check out our new website, fisheast.com, we did launch that as well, where all our contributors have articles, blogs, videos, and all that type of stuff to help you catch more fish. All right, so episode 2. Very exciting. We've spent a lot of time this week, I guess, brainstorming and talking with the collective about the type of conversation that we want to have and the kind of dialogue that we want to have with our viewers. We want to make this show very interactive. So make sure that you're paying attention to what we're saying. Make sure you're asking the questions, because we have, for you, gathered a panel that I think can do that job. But before we get to the panel, I want to bring on my co-host, of course, none other than Mr. Donnie Paterson. Donnie, what's going on?
How are we doing tonight, Ben?
Oh, you know what, Donnie? After last, 2 weeks ago, we did that first podcast. I was just excited to get the next one done and the next one after that, because I think there's a lot of stuff that we have to cover. And based on the feedback that we've been getting, it looks like there's a lot more topics that we need to get done.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. And quite honestly, I think we could have turned around and done one the very next night. So, as much as it doesn't feel like it's been 2 weeks, at the same time, we could have been doing one almost every night, because, like you said, there's a lot of stuff that we can cover, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun covering it.
That's the great thing about multi-species. We're talking multiple species across the Maritimes. This week we've got a busy week ahead of us. Right after the last podcast, we went out to Perth Andover and do some filming on some smallmouth bass. Where are we headed to this week exactly?
This week, we're going to stay inside the Atlantic bubble, but we're going to venture outside of New Brunswick, and we're heading down to Yarmouth and the Acadian shores. And we're going to go on a little smallmouth and chain pickerel adventure down in that part of Nova Scotia.
I'll tell you what, everything I've heard, and all our friends in Nova Scotia have been messaging me these pictures of these really thick, fat chain pickerel. I'll tell you what, that gets me excited, because chain pickerel comes in all variety and sizes. But we're hooking up with Matt Szeto, who's our resident Nova Scotia, fishies guy, and he guides for them all the time. You might have seen his videos. He's going to join us later. But from what I understand, we have a shot at some, literally, dare I say, world-class chain pickerel.
I don't think there's any doubt about that. Now, I mean, as a lot of these guys know, I have run a fairly large chain pickerel tournament, charity event called Fishing for Memories for the better part of a decade, and we've seen some long chain pickerel, 27 plus inches a couple times over our, but average, big fish is 25 inches or so. So there's a lot of big fish, but none of those fish have come in with the girth I'm seeing on the chain pickerel coming out of Nova Scotia. So yeah, I'm not going to say that I got a shot at catching the longest chain pickerel I've ever caught, but I got a pretty good chance of catching the heaviest one I've ever caught.
Well, we're going to discover that. I've never been down Yarmouth way. I don't think you have either, but hopefully
not to fish. No,
I'll tell you what, it's an amazing opportunity, and we hope to do our best to showcase those. If you're tuning in from Yarmouth, hit us up. We'll be downtown Yarmouth and exploring the whole region. So we're pretty excited about that. All right,
very, very much so.
One last thing, I just want to do a plug. We have one of our partners is Mustang Survival. You see me wearing the hat. Canadian company, of course, out of British Columbia. They're the manufacturers of PFDs, life jackets, survival suits. They've got a sale going on right now, mustangsurvival.com. It's 20% off. Go check it out. All right. Let's get down to business. I see we got a couple of friends joining us. We got Paul Anderson, Robert's on there. Hey, Zach, what's going on? What's going on, Nick? We're about to get down and dirty, because tonight we are talking about the fall transition. And the fall transition is a big term. It's a big term for, the end of summer going into the fall, when the leaves start changing color, the nights get cooler. And I'll tell you what, I don't know what happened. I was complaining about how hot it was. I felt like yesterday. And today I wake up and I'm like, what is going on? There's frost on my car.
somebody flipped a switch on us, and they flipped it real quick. And the fall transition can mean so much, and that's where that's why we've had to rely on our panel of contributors, because it can mean so much for so many different species. They're not all the same, and Ben's knowledge base, my knowledge base, we can't cover it all. So luckily for us, we've got an amazing group of contributors, and I think we got 4 of them coming on tonight to help share their knowledge and hopefully help all of us catch more fish this fall.
And that is the goal. So if you're tuning in right now, you're watching the second episode, and we promised with every episode to shed some light on topics that you want to hear about, and ultimately the goal is to help you catch more fish. And like Donnie said, we believe we've assembled the right panel. So on that note, why don't we introduce a couple of the guys that will be joining us tonight? The way we're doing it, because we have so many people on board tonight and we want to keep it structured so people can follow along and understand, I thought it would be a good idea to kind of break out into 2 groups. The first group being a New Brunswick group, and the second group being a Nova Scotia group. So I'm going to start off by introducing our first contributor here. His name is Rob Langer. What's going on, Rob?
Hey guys, what's going on?
Rob, thanks for joining us tonight. Rob, why don't you tell us where you're from and what you love to fish and what you're all about?
Oh, I live here on the Miramichi River, and of course, living here, I've grown to love striper fishing mainly. But I love fishing everything in the end, but striper is close to my heart at this point in my life.
So being in the Northeast, obviously saltwater is part of it. You got your stripers going on, and fall transition is certainly something I want to learn about. Especially, we're going to talk about stripers on the Miramichi in the fall. Is that what we're doing?
I think that's what we're about to do. Yeah.
That's good, because the last time Ben and I went to the Miramichi in the fall, it wasn't so good.
The next person that we have coming up, okay. I'll put you backstage for 1 second as I bring on our next guest, and I'll bring you right back. Right there. So here we go. The next person, multi-species angler himself, fishes for trout, fishes for chain pickerel, both fly and traditional fishing. He's a good friend of ours. He's also a competitive angler when it comes to bass, and he certainly knows his bass. Please welcome to the show, Jeff Rathburn. What's going on, Jeff?
Not bad. How are you guys doing?
Very, very well. Jeff, where are you from and what are you all about? Tell the folks at home.
Just out here outside of St. John, New Brunswick, a small village called Baxter's Corner. And as you said before, I love my smallmouth. I love my largemouth. But the last couple of years, I kind of set that aside and got back into my childhood love of fishing brook trout, brown trout, and anything that's got fins on it, I want to set a hook in its face.
Oh, yeah.
That's the spirit.
All right, so thank you, Jeff. I'm just going to put you backstage as I introduce our Nova Scotia contingent. Here we go. Up first is, I might have to call him Mr. Multi-Species, but I'll let him talk about it. But his name is Ryan Anderson from Truro, Nova Scotia. Ryan, welcome to Fish East Live.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Now, I already blew it away. You're from Truro because I said it. But why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're all about and what region you're from?
Absolutely. I'm from Truro, Nova Scotia. It's known as the Hub. We're basically dead smack center in the province of Nova Scotia. Like you mentioned, multi-species angler. I literally will go target any single fish that swims, from the tiniest of minnow type species to stripers. Smallmouth bass would be my favorite for sure. I'm a big fan of pickerel, but most of the time I tuck that stuff aside and go through the creeks and do a lot of creek fishing for little tiny chubs, minnows, suckers. It doesn't matter. I want to
say the word, man. I want you to say the word. You know what I want you to say.
I have spent some quality hours targeting goldfish.
Yes.
And, I'm telling you, that's it's not easy. Especially with goldfish. Who are you going to go to get advice on goldfish? You got to figure that stuff out on your own.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
When you finally catch one, that is a good day of fishing when you finally bring out a nice bright orange goldfish out of the pond.
Wow. This is something new. Go ahead, Donnie.
I think we gotta you mentioned referring to him as Mr. Multi-Species, and I think we got to give credit where it's due. Ryan, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Hopefully the folks that are watching are familiar with the Atlantic Anglers Challenge, something being put on by the Anglers Atlas people this year in light of COVID. It helped raise money for COVID relief and different charity ventures and give anglers a chance to compete when we didn't know if there was going to be competitive angling this year. And one of the categories is most species. And I know personally I've caught an abysmal number of species this year compared to you. What number are you at right now for species this year, Ryan?
I'm at 31 so far, and that's just this season, since about the middle of May. Yeah,
That's
31,
incredible.
31 species
31
since the middle of May.
Now that
And you've never left Nova Scotia.
I have not left Nova Scotia yet.
More on this later.
Yes.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you. Thanks for being with us tonight, Ryan. And last but not least, this person is a guide himself, an excellent teacher, and quite the cook when it comes to fish and all different other types of cuisine. He's our Nova Scotia director. Welcome to the show, Mr. Matt Szeto.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Oh, awesome, Matt. So why don't you tell the good folks at home where you are, where you're from, and what you like to target?
Yeah, well, I'm in Kinsack, Nova Scotia. It's about 30 minutes from downtown Halifax. I grew up in Sydney, Nova Scotia, which is in Cape Breton. I fish for anything that swims, really. I don't know how I follow Ryan Anderson, though. He kind of rewrites the definition of multi-species.
Yep.
But I think I'm a trout and salmon guy at heart. That's what I grew up fishing in Cape Breton. But coming on the mainland, I get to fish for different species. So I think I'm going to add stripers in there too. Really got a love for striped bass now. But growing up in Sydney, that's all we really had was trout and salmon. So that's still at heart. But I'll fish for anything that swims. I just love fishing in general. It doesn't matter if it's perch or yellow perch, white perch, whatever. It doesn't matter.
Well, we're going to talk about all that good stuff. So we're going to tuck you away and bring you right back right quick. Thanks for being with us, Matt. All right. So, Donnie, obviously we've got quite the panel with us tonight.
We do. Before we go any further, I want to see Kevin Levy has asked if mall fishing is allowed with regards to goldfish. No, Kevin, I'm pretty sure Ryan is actually catching them in the wild. No, they are not native to Nova Scotia. They have been introduced by some, we'll call them irresponsible pet owners that want to dispose of their fish. And the species has kind of held on in a couple spots, and Ryan found some and caught some in the wild. So no, mall fishing is not recommended.
No, it's not recommended. Okay, so Johnny, our job is to ask the right questions, is to make sure that we can translate any questions that come up on our live feed. So if you have questions, don't be shy. As you can see, Donnie will be monitoring those questions. And my job is to try to translate that into answers that will hopefully help you catch more fish by the end of all this. So like I mentioned before, let's start with our New Brunswick crew, shall we? Let's get Robin and Jeff back. Okay, guys, fall transition means a lot of things to a lot of people. What it means to me is adaptation. Adaptation in the sense that we're talking about changing the way you find the fish, the way you present to the fish, and what you're presenting to the fish. And, because fisheries is all about multi-species, it's impossible that we talk about every single species tonight. But I got two guys on in Rob and Jeff, and I think the first thing we want to talk about is a very important species, especially to the maritime provinces. And Rob, you touched on that, and that is striped bass. We all love and can't wait for striped bass season to start in the spring. When April comes around and May comes around, let's be honest, it is, striped bass fever, whether you're all the way up in Bathurst or you're coming all the way down the shore. And of course, in Miramichi, which is, world famous at this point for the run. My first question out of the gate for me, and I'm sure other people can share this, is it worth my time to come back to the Shee in the fall?
Absolutely. If I were to say, if you had to pick between spring and fall to come to the Shee to fish, I would come in the fall. You're going to catch, you may not catch as many fish, but the fish are girthier and they're mixed, right? You could catch a tinker this minute, next minute you've got one, 100 centimeters. So it's more exciting, I find, in the fall, because you just don't know what you're going to get. Where in the spring you're mostly you're going to catch the same size fish, whichever school you're on, right?
So if I understand you correctly, are you saying that you have first of all, there's less people, right? Let's be honest. The boat traffic and even the shore traffic, for that matter, you're not
absolutely
with that big rush that you have in the spring. But if I heard you correctly, are you saying that there is a better opportunity to land better sized fish in the fall?
Absolutely. No question. And for the average fisherman, like, you don't have to hunt these fish down. The big fish, they just come to you. You know, you could be fishing a spot and catch some, you know, some schoolie sized fish, and then all of a sudden, you know, bam, a 34-inch, 36-inch fish comes along, and it can happen anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the spring, it's, you know, you have to track those fish down and find them that way.
Well, one of the biggest things that I know that took me and others, of course, a long time to figure out was, you know, in the spring we're dealing with the reproduction cycle, right? We're dealing with spawn. So we're talking about fish coming in from the ocean. We're talking about the pre-spawn, the spawn, and the post-spawn, right? That's kind of the cycle that we're looking at between April and June. In the fall, they're not there to spawn, right? Obviously, they're there because why are they there? I mean, I thought all the stripers came up, did their thing in Red Bank, and left.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. The first year that I fished them, and I didn't even fish the fall. The first year I fished them, I didn't even know they were here, and I lived here, right? And but the next year, a buddy of mine showed me a couple spots in the fall to fish, and I caught, you know, some of my biggest fish that I've ever caught. And I mean, just yesterday I caught a 32.5. Like, they're just starting to come in now, and it's getting exciting.
Rob, are you finding that the fall run, is it water temperature dependent? Is it daylight hour dependent? Like, if you're going to try and predict when that run is going to start, are you going by daylight hours? Are you going by moon cycle? Like, what's the telltale factor that you're going to look for?
Water temperature, basically. It seems, what I've been figuring out, it seems once it hits around 65, that's when the fish start coming in. They start trickling in, and they just from there. I mean, there's days, you know, 2-3 weeks from now, you'll be catching 50-60 fish a day, you know, on cut bait. If you want to come in with artificials, you're going to have a lot tougher time, and you're going to have to go further upriver to get a decent bite. There are some pockets, schools of fish that you'll find along the river that are just smashing swim baits and stuff, but it's rare, it's hard to find, but it does happen.
I guess my question is, okay, you know, I think the cut bait thing is a known fact. You know, everybody kind of knows, you know, the moving baits in the spring, and obviously it calms down in the summer, and all of a sudden this cut bait deal happens. Now, what is the cut bait of choice? If I'm going up there for the first time, I have two questions. First question is, am I targeting similar zones that I targeted in the spring, those intersections, you know, those main channel kind of things? Or am I, and if I am doing that, what exactly am I using? What kind of rig and what kind of bait are we talking about here?
Mackerel would be your bait of choice. You know, other baits like squid and smelt, I've seen people use chicken livers and catch them. I mean, any kind of protein will produce a bite, but mackerel definitely seems to be the best. I think mainly just because of scent. You know, it puts off the best scent of anything else out there. So, and in regards of the areas you fish, I find you can find them in shallower waters, like in the spring, but mainly you want to be in, you know, 10 plus feet of water. I find anywhere from 15 to 25 produces the best.
Now, Darren Morana has a question, and since you mentioned water depth, they will play right into that. High or low tide, or is it really a factor?
It can be a factor. I mean, it depends on the day, right? Some days the bite is just on, and it doesn't matter what the tide's doing. When it goes slack, maybe it'll slow down a bit. But as soon as that tide starts running again, the bite's back on, right? The faster the current, it seems bait works better. Slower current, you might have a better chance with lures too. But that's basically how she goes, boys. I mean, if you want to come to Miramichi and fish stripers, bring a bag of mackerel and a circle hook and some 30-pound tests and a beefy rod, and you're going to have a good time. I mean, there's no doubt.
You know, fall transition in the Miramichi is something that I'm talking about for the first time, and I'm excited to go explore that. I know that the Fishies TV crew we're scheduled to get up there and try that, and it's going to be a learning experience for us. And we're happy and thankful to have somebody like you that can kind of give us the heads up. So let that message be. If I've learned anything in this particular topic is just because a species such as striped bass could be super popular and obviously a fantastic time in the spring, don't overlook the fall, right? You just heard from Rob, your chance of catching your best fish out of the Shee might possibly be in the fall, and I think that's going to be a theme that we're gonna see throughout all the conversations we're going to have. You're saying, Rob?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, your best shot at a trophy striper is in the fall. The biggest fish I've ever seen caught in Miramichi has been in the fall. It's 116 centimeters. Yeah.
What does that translate to in inches?
About 45 inches, I think.
Wow, 45.
Yeah.
Now I got the boys in the back studio. Yeah, like everybody here loves catching stripers, and I think we can all agree a 45-inch striper is one hell of a striper.
I mean, there's tails of a 52-inch. I don't know if it's true, but there's some tails out there. No pictures, so it's hard to...
There's always tails, aren't there? There's always tails. All right. Thank you so much, Rob. Let's pivot quickly and talk about... We'll go from striped bass. Let's get to smallmouth and largemouth bass, because, you know, if you live in New Brunswick, especially if you live on the inside near the St. John River Valley, you know, I don't care if it's from, you know, Perth all the way down to St. John. Smallmouth bass is abundant, accessible, and a ton of fun. And it doesn't matter if you catch it from shore or from a boat, fly fishing or traditional tackle. It is a hoot. My favorite time of year to target smallmouth bass is the fall, because of something called the fall feed bag. Mr. Rathburn, can you agree with me that the fall feed bag is everything it's supposed to be?
Absolutely. You find the bait, you're going to find fish feeding on them. This time of year, I mean, the bait's on the move. They're coming out of that warm water looking for cooler water, and then big old girls have been sitting deep sucking since July because the water's too hot. They're moving right in behind them.
You bet. And so this is going to be. I have a little bit of experience fishing in the fall. You know, I did the NBSFA event in the fall. Did fairly well, and obviously, you know, the patterns remain true. And you know, I've had the opportunity to fish bass, and so have you, a little bit everywhere. You know, you mentioned a key word just now, and that was bait movement. August, the dog days of summer. It is hard to sometimes find a school of perch. It's tough sometimes, especially in those really hot days. And boy, did we have a hot summer. But now you're waking up. I want to know, in your mind, when you're going out there right now, between now and let's say the end of the season, what are you looking for, and what is your mindset if you're targeting smallmouth bass at this time of year in the fall?
Well, like we said before, find the bait. So the bait's going to be where their food sources are. So most of my experience is in around the lower St. John River, so that's a different beast altogether. But you have a ton of tidal lakes that drain into the St. John River through creeks and smaller rivers and whatnot. And that water temperature stays cooler in the summer, warmer in the winter. So those fish have already got it DNA'd in their head that this is where I need to go, because this is where my food source is going to go, whether it's perch, white perch, bait fish, smelt, the year's fry, gas bro, it doesn't matter. That's where they're going. That's where I'm going to go. And I'm going to start out shallow, like this time of year, right up till the water temps hit about between 55 and 65, and work my way out deep from there. Because as the water cools off, they're going to retreat to their wintering holes, obviously. Like we talked earlier, you got to slow down. But right now, it's all about finding the bait. Electronics play a big part of that. But if you're fishing for shore, you can still see telltale signs of bait fish movement, whether it's birds or stripers moving up, boiling bait up on the surface. You know the smallmouth are going to be right in behind and picking off the leftovers, because the stripers are going to move. Those smallies are going to sit right there, whether they're in 25 feet of water or 3.5 inches. At some part of the day, they're going to put a feed bag on, and they're going to destroy a ball of bait.
So let's put this in everybody's head. Here we are in September, cooler nights. You've taken the Saturday off. You're about to go fishing. You get a nice brisk morning, right? You're getting to the water, and there's that little bit of fog, coming off the water because you got the warmer water temperature against the cooler air. What are you picking up first, Mr. Jeff Rathburn?
Top water.
I knew you'd say that.
Without even a question, I am going to throw, even if there's nothing rolling on the surface, you pick up whether it's a popper or one of my personal favorites is a spook. If you can throw that little bit of water on the surface and make that bloob sound or scatter a big bunch of droplets of water on the surface and then just let it sit, to those smallies or even the largemouth at that time of year, that's a fleeing piece of food. That's like a soda cracker with a piece of cheese being skipped across the water to me.
it absolutely, and I'm sure you'll agree with me. If you're walking along the shore, especially in the early fall, you're going to see a migration of small fish. Whether that be minnows or anything small fish, they come up right tight to the edge of the water because they sense that water temperature cooling down. Go ahead.
They're looking for warmer water and food for themselves, right? So you're getting the last hatch of the mosquitoes. You're getting sometimes I've even seen a real late mayfly hatch of the small little white ones, and those small perch and baitfish, they're up there feeding on those. And like I said, and as you know, and most of our panel know, the smallmouth aren't going to be far off. If they're up in a foot of water, the smallies are in 2, waiting for that one little bit of scared baitfish to scatter out to the grass, and they're going to pick it off.
No,
sorry,
Ben,
Don, you had something to say? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we've got a couple quick questions here from Ty. I think Jeff pretty much already answered his first question, which was basically from, what he says is what he understands bass do not enjoy the scorching summer heat. With fall brings cooler water. Does that equate to more fish in shallower waters? The short answer is yes. The long answer is as that water cools excessively, they will push back out to their wintering holes. But the initial cool down, yeah, Ty, they are going to move up shallow and they're going to start feeding shallow. His second question was having a boat or kayak would be an advantage to find those deeper waters. Any tips from people who fish from shore or wharves? Jeff already mentioned look for busting bait fish, look for predatory birds feeding on bait fish. Over and above those. Oh, okay. Sorry. Ty says Ty's a her. I apologize. But yeah, over and above the busting bait fish and the birds, that sort of thing. Do you have any other tips that you'd like to give, Jeff, as far as someone fishing from a wharf or fishing from shore, trying to find those fall smallies as they're putting that feed bag on?
One of my last trips of the year is what we call St. John River wharf hop. We leave the bass boat at home, we leave the electronics at home, we grab 2 rods and a handful of soft plastics. And we're talking like the tail end of October, the first couple weeks in November. So it's cold. Water temperatures are in the low 40s. But those big concrete wharves hold heat a lot longer. And those I've been there, and my buddies will account for this. I've been in there, guys casting way out, and they're picking up fish in like 25 feet of water. Then I see my fishing partner, Dean, he sits there and drops a tube between the water and the wharf. It's so tight, and he's pulling 5-pounders. So big rock structure, something that's going to hold heat, that's where the bait fish is going to be once that water temperature gets really, really, really low. So those concrete wharves, and there's a ton of them along the river. You could take a day on each side of the lower river and hit those old steamboat river wharves and pick up some really nice fish.
And if I could just have an opportunity to kind of expand on that, another great opportunity if you are fishing from shore for smallmouth bass in the fall, you don't overlook the sand to rock transitions. And what I mean by that is areas that some of the vegetation might have died off because of the cooling water temps. Jeff mentioned something key, and that is heat on the concrete. The same phenomenon happens with rock and with sand. Sand and rock bottom transitions hold heat better from sunlight, especially as the water cools down. That draws microorganisms, which draw insects, which draw smaller fish, which in turn draw, of course, the predators, being smallmouth bass. In the fall, and this is something very specific to the fall, it is amazing how shallow they will go. I've been on the St. John River as an example. I've been on lakes in Nova Scotia. I've been in lakes in Quebec and Ontario where we're at 50 degrees. We're now deep in the fall. The leaves are starting to fall off the trees, and you will see big smallmouth cruising on these shallow water flats. And you're wondering, what the heck are they doing there? Well, they're doing exactly what I just described, which is trying to find the last bit of food available to them that's easy to catch. Because let's remember, for a smallmouth bass, it's a heck of a lot easier to put his nose down and catch something in front of him in shallow water than try to chase something this small suspended in a 35-foot water column that can go every which way. It takes a lot more energy to catch that fish and that bait than it would just to scurry along, a shallow water situation and catch something off the bottom. So that's what I had to add.
Yeah, but something like, and one more quick little addition, something my grandfather taught me years and years and years ago. If you want to catch a fish, you want to think like a fish. So a fish wants to ingest as many calories as possible, especially in the fall, while expending as few calories to eat those calories.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to get rains coming here soon. The water levels are going to come up. You're going to get more current. And if you don't know how to fish smallies in the current, look it up, because when the current comes on, the head pond's famous for it. When the current turns on, the feed bag turns on, and especially in the fall. It just positions those fish perfectly where they can get it behind eddies right in the middle of the river. There may be a rock you have no idea. It creates a nice back eddy underwater, and those fish will lay right there, and they'll just sit there with their mouths open waiting for something to drift by. This time of year, right up until the middle of October, giver, swim baits, jerk baits, top water. But once that temperature hits 55 and lower, the biggest problem most people have is they don't slow down. They don't want to expend those calories, but they still want to eat, and they're still there, and they're still hungry. Like, you got to learn to slow down.
There we go.
Yeah, no, slowing down when the water temperature gets closer to the 50s is definitely a critical thing to do. And that's that might be a whole new other conversation, to be honest with you. But right now, if we're talking about the transition time, the best part about the transition time, you said it yourself, Giver, man, almost everything works. It's one of those times a year where you can literally look in your tackle box, and if you're a round fish, it'll probably catch it. I mean, top water, jerk baits, crank baits, spinner baits, soft plastics, hair, it doesn't really matter because they're hungry, right? And that's what they want. I'm just gonna, Donnie, is there any other questions we want to talk about before we move on to our Nova Scotia team?
No, that's it. That's we've covered everything that's come up so far.
All right.
My apologies again to Ty or TY. I apologize again, but
very good. All right. So thanks a lot, Rob and Jeff. We'll bring you back later when we have a little bit of our end of episode powwow. Thank you so much.
No problem.
So Donnie, that was our at New Brunswick contingent.
One thing we have to remember when we bring Jeff and Rob back to join Ryan and Matt at the end of the show is, I know Jeff, much like myself, has done a lot of chain pickerel fishing. I want to see Jeff's thoughts and my own thoughts versus Matt's thoughts as far as chain pickerel goes, New Brunswick versus Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
Because quite frankly, I've got no experience fishing, chain pickerel outside of New Brunswick. So I'm kind of curious as to what the similarities are and also what the differences are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring back Mr. Anderson as well as Mr. Szeto. And we'll go with this format here. All right, guys. So Nova Scotia. First thing I want to ask, is it true that the fall is a little bit delayed and a little bit later than in New Brunswick, and because you guys have a little bit more mild temperature? Would you agree with that statement?
I would.
Yeah. Now, does that for us here in New Brunswick? I think the fall transition started this week. Is that the same case in Nova Scotia?
No, I don't think it started yet. Not from what I've seen. I'm not sure what your guys' water temperatures are, but I was out on Kinsack this morning actually, and I still had 70 71, 72, I think, this morning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I was talking to a counterpart of ours that was up to Perth Andover last week, and water temperatures were down to 65 already.
Yeah. So all this to say is that, everywhere has a fall transition. You guys down there have a little bit of an extended time, and maybe it doesn't happen as quickly and happens over a more prolonged period. But having said that, I'm going to start with Ryan here. Ryan, obviously multi-species. We can sit here and literally dissect every single species. But I know that you obviously also have a hankering for L striped bass. So talk to me, or talk to us, the good folks at home and the people listening in. What are the striped bass doing Nova Scotia way right now, for the next few weeks?
Yeah, for the next little bit, with Nova Scotia, we've got a couple of different populations of striped bass we can target. We've got the ones in the Bay of Fundy, and I mean through the summer, everybody's been out on the beaches. It's a bait bite there. I mean, your only choice is to throw mackerel or squid or whatnot out on the bays. And through the summer, that fishing's pretty slow in a lot of areas with the warmer water. Through the fall, you can still fish on the beaches of the Bay of Fundy up till middle of November, maybe a little further, and still catch fish. This is the time of year when the bigger ones seem to be a little more plentiful. Like I said, no real difference in how you fish them or where you fish them. It's just you do tend to catch a few more fish and a few more bigger ones. But the big thing with the fall transition with the striped bass here in Nova Scotia out of the Bay of Fundy, you will get a large number of those fish moving back up into the rivers. So they will come up into the Shuby and the Stewiacke. The guys will still fish them the same way, using the bait, the mackerel or the squid or whatnot in the rivers. But the bigger thing there is that you will get a large number of those striped bass moving through the river and up into Grand Lake. There is a population of stripers that overwinter in Grand Lake. So, mid-September time frame is when you'll start to see those striped bass show up in Grand Lake. And it's a great fishery especially for those folks who are used to fishing in the Bay of Fundy and fishing with bait. When those fish get up into Grand Lake, that gives you the opportunity to start throwing, soft plastics and top waters and rapalas and all that kind of stuff up in the lake in the clear water. It's a different style of fishing for the same fish, basically.
Okay. Well, that was a lot. I have like 10,000 questions I need to ask you in that one spiel. Okay, hold on a second. So let's back up a little bit.
Okay.
You're talking about fall fishing. It's a lot like you're echoing basically what Rob had said earlier. You got a good opportunity for bigger fish. And we're talking about chunk, pieces of mackerel or squid or whatnot. So that's very similar. I think that's kind of a constant theme.
Yes.
Then you've got these fish coming back into the rivers, like the Stewiacke, which I see you guys spend a lot of time on. Obviously, Matt spends a lot of time there as well. Just so that I understand the geography, ocean Stewiacke flows into Grand Lake, or
no.
Okay.
So Grand Lake would flow out through the Shubenacadie River.
Okay.
Which meets up with the Stewiacke River and then flows into the Bay of Fundy.
Okay. So potentially what you're saying is those Bay of Fundy fish end up in Grand Lake. That's what you're saying.
Yes, absolutely.
So what the first question I have, why is it that when they get to the lake, we can catch them with moving baits and artificial lures, but out on the bay, it seems that cut bait is the way to go? What's your theory?
Actually, it wouldn't even. You can catch them on lures in the bay. If you're out in a boat, essentially, there's a lot more people now showing up out in boats in the Bay of Fundy and using swim baits and stuff like that. The big thing with the bay, though, is I'd say 95% of the people fishing for striped bass in the bay are fishing off the beaches. The water is super muddy, so there's no water clarity. There's limited options for baits you can use, and then you're on a beach. You've only got so much opportunity to get an actual effective cast out of a lure. And these are all, flat beaches. There's not a whole lot of, deep water you can access directly off the beaches here in the Bay of Fundy. So you're just limited, and the lures will work, but you're limited in how effective they can be just because of where you're fishing and what water you've got access to.
I guess my train of thought behind this is you mentioned that, now you just confirmed it. On the beach, you're talking about stained water.
Yes.
In the rivers, we're talking about stained water.
Yep.
But I've been to Grand Lake, and Grand Lake is not stained.
No.
It's deep. It is clear.
Yes.
So are we talking about, I mean, are these fish headed out? Do they go into the main deeper part of the lake? Or are they staying in those back bays where the rivers connect in, like the inflow?
Nope. They'll move throughout the lake for sure. In the fall, I mean, for me personally, I started on the south end of the lake, and right early in the morning, you'll get the schoolies mostly in the south end of the lake. And I mean, it's a lot of fun chasing schoolies. So I'm definitely not saying anything bad about that. But south end of the lake, chase the schoolies, and then through the day they will move. They're chasing bait fish. If you're out there on a calm day, you're going to see them busting bait fish all over the place, and you can chase them all around the lake. But like you said, it's a deep lake. They're not deep for sure. I don't typically fish much deeper than about 20 feet. And they will set up in specific locations fairly regularly. But for the most part, you're chasing a moving school in the fall when you're looking at striped bass on Grand Lake.
Well, that sounds like, is it because the bait fish end up in Grand Lake as well, and the stripers are following them into that?
Smelt.
Smelt.
Grand Lake has a good population of smelt, and the striped bass are chasing the smelt. And again, like you said, putting a feed bag on, just like the smallies.
Awesome. Well,
okay.
Donnie?
Well, Ryan mentioned that these fish overwinter in Grand Lake. I know this is a little bit off topic, but it's kind of got my gears turning. When do they move back out? Because I've been on Grand Lake in June and had a massive school swim underneath me. So I'm just curious as to how long each year they actually stay in that lake.
Yeah. I believe it would be about the end of April, mid to end of April, the schools will start to move out of Grand Lake. It's pretty common to see schools of hundreds of fish in 2 feet of water in certain sections of the Shubenacadie River. And I mean, you can go stand on the bridge and literally watch 30 to 35 inch stripers in a giant school right down below you underneath the bridge. But that's mid-April, probably towards, beginning of May timeframe. I don't doubt that I've heard that there's striped bass that stick around all year, but I don't think the big ones do. The big ones are moving into the river because they're spawning. So
makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. Okay. Well, thank you so much. We're what I thought that was super interesting is hearing the contrast between what the stripers are doing up in New Brunswick versus what they're doing in Nova Scotia, Donnie.
Well, it is, but at the same time, I get thinking about what's happening here in New Brunswick, and Ryan's talking about Bay of Fundy stripers, and we basically have the same phenomenon happening here in St. John at Reversing Falls in the St. John River. Those Bay of Fundy stripers, it's just the opposite side of the bay. They're pushing up into the river, and they're all running up through Reversing Falls and spreading out between the Kennebecasis and the St. John rivers. Yeah,
absolutely. Great opportunity for fishing. I think that's the whole point, is that if we can track the movement, you know what I mean? When it comes to fall, one of the things that I've struggled with, and all fishermen do in the fall, is that your days are shorter, right? Your sun comes up later, your sun goes down earlier. The time you have to spend on the water decreases significantly. So what ultimately happens is that when you get on the water, all you care about is catching fish. You're like, oh my God, it's the feedback. I can catch my biggest fish. Sometimes what we need to do is sacrifice a little bit of that time to track them and to study where they go. Because every time you put time on the water towards studying their patterns, their behavior, that's only going to help you in the next time around. And with those limited opportunities, because of the diminishing daylight, it certainly is a challenge. But somebody who's no stranger to putting a lot of time in water is Matt. And Matt, I'm going to segue this into my next conversation. You're a guide yourself. Obviously spent a lot of time in the Stewiacke River for stripers, originally from Cape Breton, like you mentioned. So I have to imagine that chasing salmonoids, trout, salmon, that's got to be something that's a passion for you. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, we're fortunate down at Cape Breton because, we have the Bredor Lakes, which, is a saltwater lake. So it's roughly about half fresh, half salt. And that lake is open all year for trout fishing. So, I mean, you can fish it right up until the ice is safe, and then you can ice fish it. So, I've fished trout right up until just before the ice comes on, and have caught trout right through the fall.
I'm going to stop you right there because I know all the New Brunswick guys are like, this is absolutely not fair. Why are we talking about this? Because unfortunately, where we are, and the New Brunswick guys can correct me, and Donnie, I'm sure you even know. I think our trout. When I say trout, let's be specific. I'm talking about brook trout or speckled trout. We close September 15th. Do we not, Don?
I'm not 100% sure if that's completely province-wide, but I know there's definitely regions that close on the 15th. There might be a few that close on the 30th of September, but it's within that mid to late September timeframe. Definitely not into November.
No. So I guess, everybody seems to target trout in the spring. It's the fever. Get your waders out, get your flies ready. When the ice is out and sometimes the snow is still on the ground, you're out there casting, right? I want to get that spring run. What the heck are the trout doing in the fall? Please tell us. Give us some ideas. If I want to go looking for trout, what am I doing?
Well, first I should probably clarify that brook trout season closes September 31st.
Okay.
In Nova Scotia, that's freshwater, and in the Bredor Lakes. You'll get them as a bycatch. Usually when I was fishing in the fall, back when I was living in Cape Breton, I was targeting rainbows and browns, and you'd get speckles mixed in there as a bycatch. They're all in the same area. They're all, feeding in the same places. In the fall, normally around like Thanksgiving, so middle of October, you'll start to see some of the rainbows and browns moving back out of the deeper water. When the water gets warm, they'll move into the deeper water. They start moving back into the shallower water onto the grass flats. Because on the grass flats is where we call them crawdads back home, but basically it's a little sand shrimp. It's a type of shrimp. And they'll just basically swim through these grass flats, spook up shrimp, and just kind of gorge themselves on it. And then you'll kind of see a decrease in the rainbows because they'll head up the river for a bit. So you kind of get you'll get a week or two. I think it's kind of like as they're heading to the river or brook where it's insane. There's just fish feeding heavily. You'll see fish breaking on shrimp. There's a spot I used to fish where there was a brook about maybe within half a kilometer to a kilometer away, and this flat happened to be almost right there, basically next to this brook, and they would just stay on that flat for a couple weeks and just feed like crazy, and then they would disappear for a while, and then you'd see them back in around middle of November. They would come back. But the browns would kind of always stick around. So you kind of like the rainbows would go away, the browns would still be there, then the rainbows would come back, and then the browns would go back. And that someone told me that the browns actually go up the rivers a little bit later. So I found that out kind of later on. So that's kind of looking back, I think that's what was kind of happening. And the brookies just kind of always stayed there. You'd always get into a few, but I'd always find the brookies in the fall kind of slinky. I'm not really sure why. I think maybe some of them had kind of dropped out of the brook early. I think the brookies kind of go up and spawn around September. So you were getting a lot in October, but they were always a little bit slinkier. So I think that's kind of what was happening there. But I mean, it's basically the same as any other fish. They're just strapping on the feed bag.
So let me, I've heard a couple of things that I've never heard before. So you're telling me that these trout are on sand, are on grass flats, spooking up shrimp, and that's what they're eating. Yeah. So if that's the situation, how are you presenting them, and what are you using?
Well, by far the absolute best bait is to fish with the live shrimp. There's nothing else is going to compare. Actually, the only thing close would be a shrimp fly, like a Lester the lobster is a really popular fly that we use. When I'm fly fishing the Bredor, I literally can probably throw 2 flies all day, and that's a shrimp pattern, usually Lester the lobster, and maybe like a silverside pattern, so like a Cohen silverside or a sand eel pattern that looks like a silverside bait fish, maybe a Mickey fin. But by far the best bait you can use is those shrimp. And it's kind of funny because I always talk with people about, fishing the Bredor early on and, kind of learning the ropes, back when I was in high school and then like in my early 20s, and didn't really get on to the live shrimp thing until kind of later on. And I always look back and think like, man, there was days where it was just like rainbows everywhere. And I'm talking like 2 to like 8 pound rainbows, like monsters, just everywhere. And you could not match the hatch. There was just no lure at the time that I knew that could replicate those shrimp. And it didn't matter. We'd even have worms on a float, like a night crawler, half night crawler dangling around. They won't touch it. They won't touch it if it's not a shrimp. And we tried everything. I've tried like little curly tails, little jigs, and I just couldn't replicate. And this was before I really got into fly fishing. So had I fly fished, maybe I would have more success. But later on, some friends of mine that I grew up fishing with kind of told me, like, we found basically the golden ticket. And basically you just take like a fine mesh net that you would use for like minnows or smelt or something, and you just get your hip waders on and you walk over these like eelgrass grass flats and just kind of run the net along through this grass, and you'll net all these little shrimp. You just get like maybe a size 8, size 10 octopus hook it through the tail, put it on a float with about maybe 2 to 3 feet, throw it out there, and if there's a trout around, he's going to eat it. If you see a trout break and you throw that float anywhere near that, he's going to eat it. I want to say it's a guarantee. I hate saying that when we're fishing, but like, you know, if you see fish feeding on shrimp and you got live shrimp, and you're going to catch fish.
Man, I'm kind of. It's rare that I'm at a loss of words, but this is so exciting. I've never heard of targeting fall trout on shrimp. I guess you know what? This is great. This is amazing.
And you know what? You don't.
Wait, am I alone? Like, you know, guys listening, it's like, okay, Mitch Noyles just went wow. Like, I'm not the only one that's like, am I? Like,
to be fair, Ben, though, how much fall trout fishing have you done near salt water or heavily brackish water where you're going to find shrimp?
You're absolutely right, Donnie. You know, you know, in Quebec, Ontario, Quebec, I'll speak for Quebec. You know, lake trout, for example, is closed. You know, after September 15th, brook trout as well. So I've never had a huge opportunity to target salmonoids in the fall, and rightfully so. I mean, you know, there's rules for a reason, the spawning and all that. But I think what Matt is describing is a unique opportunity that I for one, extremely excited to go and discover. And it sounds to be fun and plentiful and different, and all has all the makings of. See there, thank you, Robert. I'm not the only one that's never heard this. I got other people. I don't want to feel like an idiot on this panel. Okay, so guys, thank you so much. That was our Nova Scotia couple. I mean, we've got a lot of contributors from Nova Scotia, but tonight we have the pleasure of having Matt and Ryan with us. I'm just gonna tuck them back for one quick second. So, Donnie.
Yes.
We have learned some interesting stuff. Like, I'm looking at my little notebook here, and we've talked about striped bass, right?
Yep.
We've talked about some smallmouth.
Yep.
And we've talked about trout, shrimpy trout. One species that we haven't talked about yet. Well, we did a little bit when we said that we're going to Yarmouth this weekend to try to target them, and that is chain pickerel. I want to talk about chain pickerel, and the reason, and I'll let you tell me why I want to talk about chain pickerel, because it's a species that's near and dear to my heart. It's a species that I got my kids fishing because they're super aggressive, they're super fun. But more so than that, you know, for shore fishermen, there's a time in the year, in the fall, just like bass, they come back shallow, which presents a lot of great opportunity for some great angling.
And I think chain pickerel are something that I guess mystify is the word I'll use. Mystifies a lot of anglers because they are so used to relating to those grass lines that they can see, you know, spring and summer. And in the fall, those grass lines are disappearing, the vegetation's dying off. And I think a lot of people get a little mystified, like, okay, I can't visually see this grass. You know, where are my pickerel at? And, you know, I think it's something that a lot of people, because like you said, they're a load of fun. They're great. Other than the teeth, they're great for getting kids out fishing because they are hyper aggressive. You know, will strike hard. You know, it's an exciting, fun fish to catch, and it's just as much fun into the fall as what it is earlier in the year when you're watching them bust out of the grass.
Well, you know, in the early of the year, we like fishing from, you know, top water, especially in the spring. But let's bring back a couple of our guys here. I'm going to bring back Matt Szeto. I'm going to bring back Ryan Anderson, and I'm going to bring back Jeff. All right. So, the reason I brought you guys back, and I know for a fact you guys are a little bit nutso, and you love chasing these toothy critters. They might smell funny, but Matt has done an incredible job promoting them, not only to catch them, but also to cook them. Right?
Ben.
What's that? Yes.
Sorry, I've got to interrupt because I just saw a comment that popped up from Jamie Monroe.
Yeah.
My 12-year-old son caught a 27-inch 5-pound pickerel in Sackville, Nova Scotia. I have seen 27 inches, 5 pounds from shore, no boat. So hats off to that young man, first of all.
Absolutely.
And
so
let me
ask the Nova Scotia boys. Matt, 27-inch. Maybe that's not that. Is that a good fish for Nova Scotia for chain pickerel? Ryan, tell me.
I can tell you. I mean, 25s are relatively common. I mean, they're still that's top of pickerel is 25. You will hear of 26s, and you guys are going to Yarmouth, so you guys are going to see 26s.
Really?
Matt said guarantee earlier on something different. I'm going to give you the guarantee here that in Yarmouth, you're got to get to 26 before you're getting excited on a pickerel in Yarmouth.
Wow.
27s, like rare, very rare.
Okay, so that would be, just to put it in my bass head terms, that's like a 5-pound smallmouth here. A 27.
I don't work in pounds all that much, honestly,
okay.
But that would be equivalent to your, getting up over 21 inches for a smallmouth, right?
Fair enough.
It's big.
Okay, so on this topic, I want to talk about chain pickerel. I'm going to start off by saying chain pickerel is going to be found where you're going to find smallmouth. In the fall, for me, they congregate. If you're going to find the panfish, in particular yellow perch and sunfish, if there's sunfish in those waters, you're going to find the smaller minnows. In and around the dying weed lines, the last green grass is what you want to look for. And when you find them, it could be one cast smallmouth, next cast chain pickerel. They kind of mix in because they're kind of chomping on the same thing. This is what I've seen. Matt, Szeto, what do you think?
I see basically the same thing here as well. If you can find that last bit of weed growth that's kind of holding on and staying green, I mean, you're gonna find pickerel on it, especially if those weeds kind of are adjacent or right on a drop off to deeper water. You're gonna find pickerel there, and you're gonna find bass there. Actually, last year I was out with two other fishies contributors, and we were on my lake and on a spot just like that. And it was smallmouth bass, white perch, smallmouth bass, white perch, and I ended up hooking and losing probably would have been my personal best chain pickerel, and it was 25 feet deep, I think. We had kind of drifted a little bit off of where we were getting the bass and pickerel, and I was just about ready to put the electric motor and back it up, and I hooked into this fish. So, they're just kind of cruising there, all in the same area. But, I mean, I think basically what you said is pretty much what I see as well.
Now, I know that you guys fish a lot of lake situations in New Brunswick. St. John River obviously comes into play, especially the lower St. John River. There are sections of that lower St. John River that are absolutely polluted with chain pickerel, and fall is a great time to get in on some of that action. But more importantly, it's a great time to get in some of that big stuff. Jeff Rathburn, how do I target these areas which we know there's chain pickerel, but how do we separate it into zones that have a higher percentage for perhaps a personal best in the current?
You hit the nail right on the head there. In the current, it's been my experience that chain pickerel don't like to spend a lot of time in heavy current. So what I'd be looking for is that last of the dying green grass adjacent to the heavy current line, something that they can get out of that current, because that's where the fish are going to be. Like their food's going to be where they can get in and out of that current. The food the pickerel are going to set right up on that. Like I'm stuttering here because I got two stories going in my head at the same time. I got a spot that I fish in the spring that I fish for the Fishing for Memories tournament, and I've won it out of it. And there's a spot that I go back in late October because the fish are back in the same spot every time. And that spot sets up. It's a huge tidal change. When the tide changes, you got a 7 mile an hour current going upriver, and when the tide changes, it's a 7 mile an hour current going downriver. And if you can get off that current break and you can find that bait, in the springtime, they're right up super shallow. There's literally cows standing. You're casting your lures underneath cows in the springtime. In the fall time, I'm not even joking. The fall, the water's receded quite a bit for the summer lows, and you find the water comes out 6 inches and it drops off to 5 feet. And it drops off to 15, and on that 5 foot drop is where the last of the green grass is. You can see the yellow perch staging up there. And if you can burn a white spinnerbait through that, you're going to hook up on 24s and 25s quite often. And I've done that a few times up in Fauché, which is a lake off the St. John River. It's got heavy current as well. If you can find that spot that doesn't get affected by the current, where those fish can stage up and eat food that's coming in through the current, you're going to hook up on probably the biggest pickerel of the year.
I can't agree with you more. What you're describing to me is ESOC's like textbook right there, right? Especially when it talks about setting up fall big bait. Ryan, Jeff just talked about a bait. Let's talk bait specific. Big old white spinner bait. What's your bait du jour or bait of choice when it comes to targeting chain pickerel in the fall?
5-inch white swim bait.
Oh, rigged how? Describe the whole setup.
I rig it weedless on a weighted worm hook. So usually
on the shank. You mean the weight on the shank?
With the weight on the shank. So probably a 1/4 ounce. I like them a little bit heavy. So about a 1/4 ounce. The lake I fish is solid weeds. Even up right through fall, right through winter. I'm still ice fishing on weed lines. So everything I do is pretty much got to be weedless. And that big swim bait, just run it right over the top of the weeds and just have it kick the top of the weeds as you go through, right? And then just cover water.
Excellent. And Matt, I know you like swim baits too, but do you have another bait that the folks can try in the fall?
I actually like to drop shot them, to be honest.
Why are you blowing my mind like this tonight, Matt? What is going on? Okay.
I can't say I did that purposely. You know, I was after white perch, I think, and started hooking chain pickerel. And actually, it's a method that I've used in the summer too. You know, on those days where they get really finicky and like you get a lot of follows to the boat, I always have a rod rigged up with a drop shot. And if you get a follow and you can grab that drop shot and get it out there quick enough, 9 times out of 10 he's going to eat it.
Now,
and I don't know, it just works.
When you say drop shot, you were talking what kind of weight on the bottom?
I mean, it varies depending. I use as little as I can, if you know, depending on how windy it is, whatever. I don't say maybe a 1/4 ounce or something like that.
1/4 ounce, and how much leader? How much leader?
About 15 to 18 inches, maybe.
Oh, so that's a long leader. Okay. And
yeah, because sometimes there's weeds on the bottom, so it's basically I want it to kind of just be just above the weed line.
Okay.
If I can,
sense.
so I usually go about that.
What type of bait?
I usually just go with like the 2-inch to 3-inch, just like the gulp minnows are usually what I use. But I've used other things, but that's usually what I stick with. And I do find the 2-inch ones work a lot better most times than the 3-inch.
Folks, Matt's blowing my mind tonight. First the shrimp, now the drop shot for pickerel. I'm going to make a suggestion, maybe not as exotic as the drop shot, but something that I found that's worked tremendously well for any ESOCs. And when I say ESOCs, I mean, you know, it could be northern pike that I have a lot of experience with, and really chain pickerel is very similar to northern pike, but also with the chain pickerel here, and that is a bucktail jig. Rip jigging the weed line with a bucktail jig. It is a technique that was developed in Ontario for walleye. You'll hear it often called rip jigging. And what the technique involves is a bucktail jig, and I like to use a fairly large size one, large as far as profile, but not necessarily in weight. I usually don't throw anything heavier than a 1/4 ounce, but I like it nice and fluffy and has a big profile. Gaudy colors like the stuff the pike like, the oranges and the chartreuses and that type of stuff. But the technique is to throw it into the weed line, let it hit bottom, and literally with braided line with no leader, rip it loose. And when it falls is what triggers the bite. So if those big old, chain pickerel are stuck in the weeds waiting for an ambush and they see this big old profile come out of the weeds, they smack it. So that's what I have to add. We had this with the big spinner bait from Jeff. We had the swim bait from Ryan, finesse drop shot from Matt. My contribution to this conversation is bucktail rip jigging. You were saying, Don, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, Nate brought something up, lipless cranks along the outside edge of those weed lines. I've done that on multiple occasions, and definitely a good option. Obviously with the trebles, you don't want to be playing too deep in the weeds, but if you're playing the edge of a weed line, they will come out and they will swallow it.
All right. Okay.
Just on a quick other note about those lipless crankbaits, having some experience fishing largemouth with them, Donnie. In the late fall and even in the winter time, you can bury those lipless crankbaits in that tall eelgrass. Give that rod a real quick snap and yo-yo that lipless right up out of the grass, and if those pickerel are there, they're going to eat it.
Yeah, pickerel just love that, especially right before it gets really, really cold, that super aggressive type thing. Another bait or presentation I like to mention that's kind of like an honorable mention would be a chatterbait or a bladed jig. Sometimes they're on the spinner bait. They really like the big willow leaves. Other times they like the vibration of a bladed jig. Many times they like one or the other, or maybe they like both, but certainly something, if you have that in your arsenal, give it a shot. Chatterbait, bladed jig along weed lines, or a lipless crankbait like Nate Dussault and Jeff just confirmed. And that's what I would go, and what I think the panel here would go with as far as chain pickerel is concerned. I want to bring Rob back here. Rob, I don't want to get lonely. Rob, how you doing? You still there? I know it's chain pickerel. I know you got to drive a little ways to get this on chain pickerel.
I never even caught a chain pickerel, so I learned a lot right now. I might go chase some next week at this point.
I seen you taking some notes there. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're at the hour mark, ladies and gentlemen, and I think we've done the best job we can to kind of give the folks listening at home a taste for a fall transition. I think I want to end the episode with a little bit of maybe a Q&A. If anybody watching has any questions, we've got our panel all lined up here to be able to help you out. And while we're waiting for those questions, I just want to segue back to the stripers a little bit here, because I am infatuated with striped bass. I love striped bass, and all I want to do is catch striped bass. I want to be more specific. And if Ryan and maybe Rob first, and I'll go to Ryan after. Rob, can you be more specific as to the exact setup you're using? I know you mentioned circle hook, but can you be very specific as to rod, reel, line, hook, swivel, like that whole thing? I need to understand what am I buying?
Yeah. So I mean, it depends. It really depends if you're fishing from shore or from a boat. If you're fishing from a boat, I mean, you just use your regular boat rod, about 7 foot, medium heavy power, probably. A 30-pound braid, and that bait rig, you want your bait to be anywhere from 8 to 15 inches from your weight, right? It doesn't seem to really matter. It's just all a matter of preference. Some days they are sitting a little off the bottom a little bit, and some days they're right down on it. But when you're using mackerel, they can find it pretty easily, right?
What weight are you using?
Well, it depends on the current I'm fishing. I like to go as light as possible, because the heavier your weight is, if the striper grabs it and feels that weight, he might be like, no way, and just turn away, right? And spit it out and go. So you want to use as light as you can without your weight bouncing off the bottom with the current. So you want to stick to the bottom, but not super heavy. You don't want to go 5-6 ounces when you don't need it, right? Because the striper is going to feel that, and you're not going to hook up as much.
And what kind of hook are you using?
I'm using I use between a 7 to 9 aught circle hook.
Circle hook.
Sometimes I'll go down to
No,
a
you-
5/0.
Somebody had a question?
You said 7 foot medium heavy. Now you're talking an inshore class rod,
Yes.
or
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm not using like a surf rod or anything like that. If I'm fishing from shore, I will use a surf rod. But
I'm not walking out. But I'm not walking out to my garage and grabbing my 7 foot medium heavy rods that I use for smallmouth fishing. And
no, exactly.
You're going something a little beefier than that.
Yeah, because some of those hits can be very sudden, right? And your rod will just buckle right over. I mean, if you get something that's 40 inches, grab it and go. I've seen guys snap their rods off, right? Medium-sized rods, and just snap right off the first hop. They'll have 40-pound braid on and a medium rod, and when they get a big fish that grabs it, it's gone, right? So you want to be prepared for those big fish because they're around.
So it sounds very similar to what you would use as far as rod and reel are concerned under normal circumstances, like throwing swim baits and type. But really, what I wanted to know, you told me, was the weight, the distance and leader, because I want to set this all up before I get there, right? And have the right tackle. So now that we've heard from Rob, I'd like to hear what Ryan has to say about that. Is there any suggestions or contrast to that presentation?
You talking Bay of Fundy or the Great Lake Stripers? Bay of Fundy?
Both. Let's talk about both. We can talk about both.
Bay of Fundy, the big rig there is what's called a high-low rig, which is it's basically your upgraded drop shot type rig with 2 hooks on it. So for me personally, I'm running a 4 or 5 ounce weight. About 6 inches up, we've got a 10-odd hook, and then another 6 or 8 inches up from that, another 10-odd hook. Using big rods, whatever's capable of throwing those 3 to 5 ounce weights. So for me personally, it's a 10-ounce surf casting type of setup, right? 40-pound test. The high-low rigs I use are actually tied up with 100-pound test. It's probably a little excessive, but that covers most of the Bay of Fundy. I'm using in the fall. Usually, I'm using mackerel. Try and get it as fresh as possible, right? But a good, healthy chunk of mackerel. And to repeat what Rob said, if you've got a big striper that's going to hit your bait, it is going to grab it and it is gone, right? So I personally have a bait feeder set up on my reel. So has that little drag set up so that it can grab the bait and go with just a small amount of drag, and then kick over to the big drag when you set the hooks. So that's the setup for striped bass in the Bay of Fundy, and that's a typical setup. Most guys on the beach are going to use something like that. With Grand Lake, most of what you're doing is looking for fish. So I'll do a lot of trolling with your sort of average sized rapalas, tail dancers, and deep diving shad wraps, stuff like that. Occasionally I'll use a rattle and wrap or something like that. So I'm using medium action bass gear, basically, with the expectation that most of the fish you catch there are going to be schoolies. But being medium action, especially if you're out in a boat, you can handle a 30-inch striper. You're going to have some fun doing it. But medium action bass gear, 20-pound test, 20-pound leaders, long lines out to troll. If you get into the schoolies, you go back and you chase your school and throw, probably that rattle and wrap or some like a bigger X wrap kind of thing.
Awesome. And just to clarify, you mentioned rapalas and hard baits. We're talking just so the folks at home know the regulation behind that with catching the striped bass in areas like Grand Bay. It's not. There's nothing like a single barbless hook or anything like that.
No, not in Grand Lake. In Grand Lake, you're free to use whatever gear you want to use there. Okay,
fantastic. I noticed that our boy Mitch has a question. Mitch Noyles, our cameraman from Fish East, because I think I've got him all hot and bothered right now, and Matt has them all hot and bothered with these shrimp. He's asking, what month is best with the shrimp and trout for this time of year? I can't stop thinking about it. I want to go so bad, and that's from shore, right? Matt.
It is from shore. I mean, you can fish it from a boat as well. Growing up, I didn't have the luxury of a boat, but you really didn't need it because they're coming in shallow anyway. They're basically coming to you. So if you're out in a boat, you're basically casting to shore. So it's not necessary to have a boat. The best month is actually spring is actually the best time to do it. But if we're talking fall, late October into November is what anytime from like mid October through November is when you start seeing them. You know, you need the water to cool down. They won't come back in until the water cools down a bit. You know, it's always been around Thanksgiving. I used to travel home from university on the Thanksgiving break, and I'd always get into them. So that's like middle of October, but it's basically like end of October into November is when it really kind of gets pretty good. Just before they kind of get into the rivers there.
All right. Awesome.
Yeah.
Hope that answers, Mitch, the question you had. So I've saved the best for last. This is it. This is how we're going to close the show. One by one, I'm going to ask you guys. Oh, wait. One more question. We got Jeff Roussel asking a question. What size of bait do you use? I'm guessing Jeff is still talking about the shrimp. How big are the shrimp, Matt?
They're not very big, and that's why it was so hard to kind of replicate that. Like you'd see all these shrimp baits out, but they're all like, you know, from down like in the warmer salt waters down in Florida, like 3 to 5 inch big shrimp baits. They're too big. The shrimp they're quite small. You know, 1.5 to 2 inches on average is how big the shrimp are. You know, when you're going around with your little net, if you get like a 2-inch shrimp, that's a pretty good size one. A lot of them are actually too small to even put on a hook. So they're quite small. And the only thing I've really found to kind of replicate those shrimp are fly fishing. It's the only thing that comes close that I've found so far.
Fair enough. All right. So as I was saying, the closer of today's show, which the theme of a fall transition, I think I'm going to go and do the roundtable and one at a time ask these guys. You know, these guys have every opportunity to fish any species they want. But if you had one day in the fall, one day only, where would you be and what would you be targeting? I'm going to start with Jeff Rathburn. Jeff, you have one day that you're allowed to fish in the fall. You can only target one species anywhere in the Maritimes. What is Jeff Rathburn doing?
It sounds like I'm going to the Bredor Lakes to go fish rainbows and browns.
There'll be a whole bunch of fishies guys all along the shore. Before you knew about the shrimp, though, before you knew about the Bredor Lakes, what would that be?
I'd probably be pulling 18-inch soft plastic eels looking for a 50-pound striper in the St. John River.
Oh, we didn't even talk about that. You know, I'm so happy you brought that up. You know, we've been talking about cut bait on the coast. We've been talking about in the Grand Lake and all that. But St. John River has a very unique, albeit, what's the word? Elusive, big fish population.
That's right.
So
that the St. John River and the Kennebecasis River in the fall and the late fall, your chances of a 50-inch fish are probably the best in the Maritimes, to be honest. I've got one friend that's got 2 over 50. My biggest is 48 3/4, all from the same hole. But to go up and catch, 2 or 3 fish in a day isn't that heard of further upriver. But, like the 45 to 47-inch range, late in the fall, like we're talking late October, early November, you got your parkas on, you're being shot at by duck hunters. It's an interesting time to be underwater because there's nobody out there with you.
All right, so
big
Jeff
baits,
Rathburn
big lines, big rods.
Yep. So Jeff Rathburn says hunting world-class giant stripers, Kennebecasis River or St. John River. Okay, let's go to Ryan Anderson. Ryan, what are you saying? You got one shot, one fish, one species, one day in the fall. Where?
Absolutely nothing I like better than deep smallmouth late fall after they've set up in sort of their wintering type areas. Find them on the fish finder and drop right on top of their heads and just catch smallies all day from, 35 feet of water.
I wish we had more time because honestly, we can talk about this particular topic for a long time. But for the folks at home listening, what Ryan is referring to is post turnover wintering fish, late fall season after a lake is turned over, where all the water column is now equalized in water temperature. You can find hordes, I mean hordes of smallmouth bass, the biggest smallmouth bass in the lake, all huddled up together in one zone. And something that we didn't get a chance to really explore, maybe we'll do this another episode, is talking about not only the fall transition, but where patterns transition from a horizontal presentation to a vertical presentation. And what Ryan was making reference to is using your electronics, getting on top of these fish and literally vertical presenting, whether they're jigs or drop shot or whatnot, and just schooling up. And I've done it in the past many, many times. And I definitely agree with you, Mr. Anderson. That is addictive as all heck, and it's super fun. Okay, let's go to Matt Szeto. Matt, one species, one place. Why do I think I know what you're going to say? But go ahead. Tell the people at home what you would be doing.
You're probably expecting me to say trout in the Bredor, but it's not.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Now, providing conditions are right, providing we got good water levels, I would be for sure on the salmon rivers with my fly rod targeting Atlantic salmon.
Oh, man, that's another episode that we could talk about. Atlantic salmon, obviously a very sought after species. Even for myself, I've yet to hook one. I've tried, but I'm not there. Yeah. I still haven't had the pleasure yet, but it's going to happen.
It's not easy. It's not easy. I got a good buddy. My fishing buddy there took him 5 seasons to hook his first one.
Well, I'm only on season 1, so I guess I got some time to go.
You got some time.
Okay, and where would you be doing that, Matt?
Oh, Cape Breton for sure. I mean, any salmon river really, but if I had to choose, it would be the Cape Breton rivers, definitely.
Very best. Going to Rob. Rob, anywhere in the Maritimes, one species, one day. It's the only day you get to fish in the fall. What are you doing?
I'd be in Perth Andover chasing smallmouth.
Oh, you discovered Perth Andover, did you?
Oh, man. I actually recently just discovered smallmouth. So, yeah.
How's that working out for you? You still have a credit card that has space on it?
My wife's not liking it too much. We'll put it that way. But yeah, I mean, no doubt that's where I'd be in Perth.
Why? Tell the folks at home why, those who don't know.
There's monsters in Perth. There and you don't have to be a seasoned smallmouth guy to catch one either. It's just a blast. And I mean, I'm sure you guys know because you guys are pretty seasoned smallmouth guys. But for me, I'm just learning the pull that these fish have, and it's just unreal, man. And Perth has got me. I've got goosebumps right now just thinking about it.
Well, I'll tell you what. I know Jeff has a lot, and so does Donnie. Perth, Andover, for those just tuning in, maybe you don't know about the area. So northern part of the St. John River Valley towards Quebec, about 2 hours along the highway from Fredericton is a portion of water on the St. John River called the Beechwood Head Pond. And that particular stretch of water is home to what, and you know what, if you're listening at home, and you can argue or debate me on this if you want, but I'm going to say it right now, home of the largest world-class smallmouth bass fishery in the Maritimes, and that's all inclusive. Now, are there lakes that I personally haven't visited, maybe in Cape Breton that I've heard of here and little things? Yes, I have, but I'm saying that this place is a 4-pound plus smallmouth bass factory. Absolute factory. Yeah. You don't go to Perth to catch anything but giant, fat, triple chin, humped back smallmouth bass. The crayfish population is redonkulous, and I see all the guys here absolutely agreeing with me. If you haven't done it, I know Matt hasn't done it yet, but
yet.
Jeff obviously has. Ryan, have you been to Perth yet?
Nope, haven't made it out there, but apparently that's on my list now.
Perth is Jurassic Park for smallmouth bass. That's all I have to say. Donnie already knows. So on that note, Donnie, I want to hear from you. One place, one day, one species. What are you doing?
I am so torn because it's either Perth Andover for smallies or, on the St. John Kennebecasis for stripers. I mean, realistically, I'm going to have to say right now, I'd have to go for the stripers on the St. John Kennebecasis system, just for the simple fact is I haven't got that 40-inch plus fish yet. I have fished Perth Andover in the fall, and don't get me wrong, I'll go back all day, every day. But I haven't got that 40-plus inch striper yet, so I would have to say Kennebecasis, St. John River system, chasing those big silver ones.
I don't know if it's just me. Did I break up or did you guys break up there? Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Hello. Yeah. Okay. If you could just repeat, I didn't hear you, Brownie, if you don't mind. What was the last? You said it was either Kennebecasis stripers or I didn't hear the other
Or
part.
Perth Andover, and I would have to
Right.
go with the Kennebecasis stripers just because I haven't got my 40-inch fish yet. So I need to go to the Kennebecasis and get that because I have fished Perth in the fall. So I got to steer away from that and focus on the stripers.
Very best. My closing remark as far as where I would be, one day Maritimes, any species. Well, I'm going to go with the one that is still on my bucket list because if anybody knows me, I tell them all the time, I'm only going to start fishing this species when I turn 50, and that's not that far away. So that time is a-coming, and that is the muskellunge. If I had one day in the fall that I could fish anywhere in the Maritimes, it would be targeting muskie on the St. John River, either in the head pond near Woodstock, Nakawik, or right in Fredericton. Having such a fishery that's accessible to us, and I live in Fredericton, so obviously it's really accessible. But it is truly the apex predator, and I've caught some accidental bycatches. I don't count that. I have yet to catch a muskie while targeting them, and that's where I would be. So thanks, guys, for sharing your thoughts with us, and big thanks to everybody who's watching right now. Guys, I'm gonna bid you adieu. So, Rob, thank you so much. Thanks for being on the show. We'll be talking soon. We look forward to more content and information coming from the Miramichi area. All right. So, thank you very much, Mr. Rathburn. Thank you for your insight as well. Looking forward to hopefully sharing a deck with you soon enough this fall before it all ends.
Always invited.
All right, man. Take care, Ryan. We are rooting you on for that multi-species, title. I understand you're coming down our way, so hopefully we get to connect and maybe we can get you on some of those species that you need to check off that list. Thank you for bringing your wisdom to our show this evening.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Thank you.
And last but not least, Matt Szeto. Dude, you win the award. You got the mic drop moment of the thing. I don't know if we've mentioned this yet, guys, but we are filming a show. Did we talk about this yet? We talked about Yarmouth. Did we talk about?
No.
Well, okay. Well, we're going to talk about it right now. Guess what, folks at home? We are super excited because this weekend we are hopping on the ferry, going across the Bay of Fundy, and driving to Yarmouth, and we're going to be filming a show because of the good folks at the Nova Scotia Guides Association and Tourism in Nova Scotia. We're going to showcase the Yarmouth region and hopefully tackle some of those big Yarmouth chain pickerel and smallmouth bass that we talked about earlier. Mm-hmm. But more recently, we are confirmed for a late fall trip driving to Cape Breton on the hunt for shrimp. No, that's not true. We're not on the hunt for shrimp. We are on the hunt for these incredible salmonoid species that Cape Breton has to offer. Matt, what can we expect from this trip?
Lots of nice trout, hopefully, but you said we're not on the hunt for shrimp. We probably will spend a little bit of time hunting for shrimp that we can grab for bait as a backup. I think maybe we can come up with a few different things to target them, and but I know if we get those shrimp, it's going to be game on. But I'm excited because I haven't actually I haven't really gotten to spend much time in the last few years targeting trout in the Bredore. It's something that I always used to love doing, and I'd get home a couple times when I was in university. I'd have Thanksgiving break, and then like if Remembrance Day fell on a weekend, I'd be down, and sometimes I would just shoot down on a random weekend because I knew how good it was. Yes. So I'm really excited to get back down there. And the last few seasons, I've been spending most of it on the salmon rivers and not much of it, in the Bredore. But I got down there last year. It wasn't quite, well, I guess it was still technically fall. It was, I think December 11th, we went down and got into a bunch of rainbows down there. So
awesome.
I'm really looking forward to it. And I think, we'll get into a lot of rainbows down there, hopefully. And hopefully we can get into some of those nicer browns that are down there too.
Yes, sir. Okay, well, thank you so much, Mike. Look forward to that trip, and I'll see you on Friday.
Okay.
Thank you so much for being with us
See you
today.
then.
All
Thanks,
right.
Matt.
Donnie, another episode comes to an end. Episode 2, the fall transition. I think we did a decent job, I hope. At least we know Mitch. At least Mitch said the yeah, buddy. So at least we know he was happy with the show. I'm happy.
Mitch is excited. Jamie saying interesting again. Great job, guys. Thanks, Jamie. Folks, this is new to us, so we welcome your feedback. We appreciate your comments. If we screw up, don't slam us too bad.
Please.
We'll take your criticism, but you don't need to swear at us.
Yeah.
We're just out here having fun, talking fishing, and we could have gone a lot longer tonight. We went a little longer, I think, than what we had even planned. And I know with that group of guys, we could have gone a whole lot longer, but it is what it is. And for you guys, an hour and a half staring at these two faces. I won't say anything about the other guys, but about staring at these two faces, you've probably had enough.
Yeah, they sure did. Well, I'll tell you what, that was fun. And again, thanks for being the co-captain on this ride. And I will see you tomorrow, bud.
See you tomorrow night.
All right.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. And yes, Ben, check your messenger. Jamie sent us those 27-inch pickerel that his young fella caught.
Perfect, Jamie. We'll get that up. Thank you. Okay, so another exciting episode comes to an end, the fall transition. Hey, guys, if you like what you're watching, make sure you give us a like on our Facebook page. If you haven't had the time, go check out our brand new redesigned website, fisheast.com. What's next? Like we mentioned, we're headed out Yarmouth Way to film a show. We're going to be right back here to talk to you all 2 weeks' time. Every 2 weeks, we're going to put on this Fish East Live for you. In that time, make sure in the comments below you maybe put some suggestions for topics you want us to cover. We are fortunate enough to have a collective of passionate anglers that could literally, or at least do our best to answer just about any question, or at least do our very best to try. I hope you learned something about the fall. We hope you can get out there this fall. Thanks for joining us once again. I'm your host, Ben Wu. We'll see you on the next ride.